Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
DKWilkinson.com professional Australian voiceovers are proud to be a four-wheeled sponsor of Negative Camber. DKWilkinson.com. With over 10,000 commercials voiced and an international award for a commercial advert. Commercial and corporate, we do make a difference. Phone messages for under $10. DKWilkinson.com, your professional wordsmith.
This podcast is proudly supported by Matt Hall from DR Kart South Australia, HandyPay, SA's leading personal lender, Patrizzi Course, and Tindo Solar, Australia's only solar panel manufacturer.
It's time for Negative Camber.
This is the opportunity of Negative looking for, and he's going for it. Oh my goodness, this is fantastic.
Proudly sponsored by Tindo Solar. Start generating free energy and saving money with Aussie-made solar. Call 1300 846 367 or visit their website tindosolar.com.au. And now it's time to introduce your hosts, Jamie Lemure and Lee Harrison.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Negative Camber, the motorsport show, proudly supporting Scuderia Ferrari Club Adelaide. I'm your host, Jamie Lemure, and with me is Lee Harrison.
How you going, mate?
I'm going well, mate. I'm going well. We've hit the big time. We've gone from kitchen sink, we've gone to dining room, radio studio, and now we're on the web.
On Facebook Live and all over the socials. So, mate, it's been a meteoric rise for our little podcast in the last 12 months. But
it has.
Look, so excited, and let's see what we can do.
Absolutely. We're this show I'm really looking forward to tonight. It's our season finale, Christmas special if you want to call it that. But we're going to be blessed with motorsport royalty tonight with Motogp Chief Engineer and Extraordinaire Jeremy Burgess, as well as V8 Supercars legend Dean Canto.
And those guys have had absolutely amazing careers, and can't wait to hear all about them, what got them into their chosen motorsport, and how they made the most of their opportunities when they came.
100%. Speaking of motorsport, fair to say we had our fair share of coverage of motorsport this week with the F1.
Yep.
No doubt we'll analyse that in more detail tonight. I'm sure there's lots of people looking forward to that. But very quickly, your take on it?
Look, I think the best decision was being made, and we got the best end to the Formula One season. I think anything less than the ending that we got would have been anticlimactic, to say the least. I know that there's a lot of people out there that disagree with my thoughts. But
yep, that's me included.
Yeah, no, look, like I said, we're going to agree to disagree on this one. But yeah, anything less would have been unjust, in my opinion. How did you see it?
I thought my initial reaction was one of disbelief, I think, from what I saw on TV. But also, it became apparent that it was no longer a sport, and all of a sudden became part of an entertainment.
Yeah.
And that's not the Formula One that I've grown up to watch and love.
We had that debate a couple of weeks ago, actually. When
we did.
Sport, is it sport or is it entertainment? And what's the differentiation between the two of them?
Yeah, I have no doubt that the FIA in particular, Michael Massey, have got some accountability and responsibility on that. And quite frankly, I don't blame Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes and their response on how they've gone about it. But we can cover that a little bit later on.
And look, it's an issue that divides opinion. So for people watching at home or listening in on the radio, if you've got any thoughts or questions for our guests or thoughts on what happened at the Formula One, feel free to drop a comment on the Facebook Live video or get in touch with us, and we'll answer your questions as we go on through the show. Yeah,
well, look, we need to get started. We've got a lot to cover, so we'll get into the Australian Karting Championship that took place last weekend at Monado. It was the season finale for the AKC, proudly supported by Castrol as well as SP Tools. And there were a lot of champions and championships that were actually resolved on the weekend as well. So your overall take from what you'd seen?
Look, awesome event to get up and running within 3 weeks. I said to you earlier, they got it surprised on them. Last round, thank God COVID lifted its game a little bit for us and let some people across the borders. So excellent job by the Go-Kart Club of South Australia to get the event underway, and I think they got awarded with Event of the Year as well. So excellent work by them. Yep. I went up there for a little bit on the Sunday morning. I was there from sort of 10-ish o'clock, and then Yeah, the racing was pretty good. A few classes definitely shone. KA3 Senior was probably my takeaway from all the races. The rest sort of the field strung out a little bit, but otherwise pretty good event.
Yeah, our thoughts go out to Riley Harrison as well, who had a pretty serious accident on Saturday, I believe. He had a broken tibia after rolling the cart, which was a pretty horrifying accident. I think they had to red flag the Cadet 12 series as well for that event. So on behalf of us, mate, I know that we saw each other a couple of weeks ago at the Karting South Australia trophy presentation. So all the best. I hope you do recover and that we'll see you back on the racetrack shortly. So speaking of results, we'll get into it, eh?
Yep,
so we talked about KA3 Senior. So first place was Jace Matthews, followed by Nicholas Sacco, and then the Linspector, Benito Linspettore Montalbano for third, who had a fantastic drive. Motor seized, I believe, in Heat 2, and it prompted him to have a comeback drive from the rear of the field. And over the last couple of heats, he sort of worked his way up and ended up getting third overall.
Yeah, solid fight back, and kudos as well to Troy Fortania, the South Australian. Had lots of pace and threatened to get on the podium, but an unfortunate accident in Heat 4 on Sunday morning saw him start the final well down the field, and he fought back to 6th place. He probably was on for 4th or 5th as well, but unfortunately he missed the tune a little bit and lost a bit of time there. But Jace Matthews come away with the round win, and that was enough to seal the championship for him as well.
Yep, kudos to him. In Cadet 12, we had Jensen Burns, Lewis Francis and Kai Burke. Notable mentions on the South Australian front were Scuderia Adelaide's Ocean Colangelo in 10th. Fantastic effort, top female in that category as well. 12th was Mitch Burgermeister and 27th was Massimo Calabro.
Yeah, good field. That racing at the front of that was awesome with the Burns boys and Lewis Francis as well. Those guys were driving like mad dogs out front, and congratulations must go out to Lewis Francis who sealed the title on Sunday afternoon as well.
Yeah, notable mentions as well. A sad DNF for Noah Enright. He had some tremendous pace leading up to it. And probably flew the flag overall for the most part in regards to pace, being South Australian champion as well.
Yeah.
So, and of course we had the did not start with Riley with the fractured tibia as well.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Next we had KA4 Junior. We had Ryan McMillan who finished first, Benjamin Munro second, and then Michael Januz in third.
This one was really dominated by McMillan. He had a really good lead in all the events that I saw. Unfortunately, sort of missed the mark in a few of the other rounds, so wasn't really in the title hunt. But well done to Alex Ninovich, who had a faultless round again and come away with the Australian Championship.
100%. Notable mentions as well. We had Salvatore Imbrogno in 10th, Riley Fortainer in 14th, and then Giuseppe Imbrogno in 20th position as well.
Perfect for the South Australians representing themselves very well on the national stage.
We had the Tag 125 class next with Brendan Nelson first, followed by Lee Nicolau in second, and then Cody Brzezinski in third.
Cody did well with the only Rotax in the field there. Tag 125, a mixed engine class, and unfortunately I would have thought more Rotaxes would have made the trek across to Monardo, being a Rotax favourable track, but Cody flew the flag for that engine brand. Unfortunate for Ruben, he just didn't quite have the pace representing South Australia, and Brendan Nelson ended up stealing the championship out from under his nose, unfortunately. Yeah,
I've nicknamed Ruben Barrichello moving forward. Yeah. So, Barrichello had, they experimented with the setup in the final. They raised the ride height a little bit to try and see if they could stop flattening out, and they went the wrong way with the setup, and that compromised his pace as well. So unfortunate for Ruben, because all he had to do was really finish second. He didn't even have to win the final in order to take away the title. So yeah, a bit of a bummer there. Brock Harrison finished 13th, and then Sam Mutton 15th as well overall.
Good for them in their first try in Tag 125 at the national level, especially for Brock, and Sam's still in only his second race meeting in that level as well in Tag 125, so good showing from them. Yeah,
100%. In Cadet 9 we had Dominic Mercury, who finished first overall. Sensational drive. Opportunity presented itself with a couple of guys taking each other out at the beginning, and then just sailed away and just drove the wheels off it. So Dominic dominated.
Exactly, dominated, and good. We talked about him 2 weeks ago, how he was going to go considering his results elsewhere in the lead up, and he did not disappoint. Sebastian Eskandari Morandi had the series racked up, so he didn't really even have to try too hard over the Monardo weekend, but it was good that a South Australian was there to pick up the pieces and represent South Australia on the top step of the podium.
Yeah, we had Cruz Kelly second, and obviously Caelan Burke third. Notable mentions was our own Ilyana Ostojic in eighth. Fantastic effort, considering that it was her first time entering into the AKC.
Yep.
So it was a completely different level from what she's raced here in South Australia, and so top job.
And I think she learnt a lot as well, so it'll be interesting to see how they go next season, competing in more of the Australian Championship rounds.
100%. A lot of credit's got to go to Matt Hall from DR Kart South Australia, one of our proud supporters as well. That's mentored Ileana in this series. And her driving has gone from strength to strength in the last 6 months as well.
Absolutely. She's changed phenomenally in the last few months as well. So kudos to Matt and everything he does for the club.
Yeah, 100%. Desmond Harrison finished a notable 11th, 13th Michael Capobianco, 15th Levi Ross, and 16th Uthran Smith as well. So credit to the kids for that. X30, you label the premier class.
Yes.
Silly boy.
Yeah.
Bradley Jenner first, Harrison Hoey, also known as the Falcon, finished second, and then Jason Matthews in third.
Yeah, unfortunately, Jacob Dowson was another South Australian who was a bit unlucky. He just had to sort of keep his nose in the front, but I think he got out-muscled under the pressure of the big stage, and Brad Jenner got away with the championship. It was tight going in. I think there was only a few points separating the two of them. So it was always going to be a close battle, but Jacob unfortunately just missed the boat a little bit again. And Brad came away with another Australian title.
Yeah, fantastic effort. I was hoping Harrison, the Falcon as he's now known, was going to get up and do it for me, but no, I missed out on this one.
Why are you calling him the Falcon?
Well, Hoey, so GDHO, Hoey, the Falcon.
Yep.
So
cool.
It sounds cool. It's a good racing name.
Well done.
So seventh was Jacob Dowson, and sadly for Christian Cowie, a DNF as well.
Yep.
All right, then we had KA2. So we had Costa Taparis first, Jake Rutkowski second, then Peter Buzanyelos in third. Notable mentions were 14th Wesley Bowden, 15th Anthony Capobianco, and 16th Jacob Chandler.
And of course Leon Cordato, who won the Australian title, with unfortunately Jacob Shalala not rocking up.
All right, and then in KZ2, we had Troy Losco first, Joshua Denton second, and then Cody Gillison third, with Christian Cowie finishing 12th. And that was a great result for Troy. Wrapped up the Australian Championship on about round second heat in, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was the second heat in on Saturday. He had the championship sealed up. But how good was the recovery drive from Josh Denton? He struggled for pace Friday, Saturday, and I was speaking with Craig on Sunday morning, and he just said a lack of driving and lack of time to prepare, with Josh obviously moving into his role with BJR as well, that they were just on the back foot a little bit. So for him to get up and finish second and put in the drive when it counted, absolutely awesome. Yeah,
100%. Credit to Josh. I spoke to Craig as well, and he was stoked with that.
Yeah.
So wind up for a good effort as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So that was that wrapped up the Australian Karting Championship, brought to you by Castrol. That'll obviously be back next year. I think February, I believe it is. February, March, something
February,
like
March
that.
It starts, and of course the round in South Australia over Easter long weekend. So any of our South Australian listeners, if you want to see karting at its top level, Easter long weekend out at Bolivar Raceway.
So we're going to be off to a break, and then when we come back, we'll have Jeremy Burgess. The Motorsport Show, you're here with Jamie, and this is my co-host Lee, and alongside me, Jeremy Burgess. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, thanks, Jamie. A pleasure to be here.
Mate, it's rare that you've got the opportunity to have greatness in the studio, but your record epitomises motorsport engineering excellence, in my opinion. So, how so? Well, 14 World Championships, 157 MotoGP victories, 280 podium finishes, and this man, you changed the game, really, in terms of management as well as motorcycle engineering. So, mate, it's an honour to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think it's quite like you said it, but I don't think I changed the game. I think the game was changing, and we evolved with it, and I was lucky enough to be there with riders who were always capable of winning, working with factory teams who were expecting to win. So put all of that together, and a good team of blokes around me were able to get the job done.
Yeah. What, since you've retired, I guess back in 2013 from MotoGP, what's kept you occupied up until this time?
Oh, just being in the hills. I enjoy home, play tennis, golf, couple of classic cars.
Yep.
The winter's a bit difficult after 35 years not having one, but I'm getting used to it. I was 60 when I finished in Europe, and to take on another young rider would have sort of made me a grandfather figure. So I felt that it was pretty much the entirety of my working life was spent in Europe.
Speaking of other young riders, just as you hung the boots up, so to speak, did you see anyone who you had your eye on at that time where you thought, if I got a hold of them, they would be the next multiple world champion?
Look, I wasn't really looking, Lee. I missed out on seeing a lot of young Australian riders because of my time away, and names that are household names here in Australia. I don't even know what some of these guys look like, so it's a bit embarrassing sometimes.
Yep.
But you can't be in two places at once. My working life was in Europe, working with the best riders in the world, and that was a great place to be. But certainly riders like Marc Marquez have come up, watching Valentino Rossi in his early days come through, watching Wayne Rainey, Mick Doohan, Wayne Gardner, being lucky enough to be associated with a lot of those riders. An absolute pleasure and a really good part of my life.
Yeah. Speaking of life, let's take it back. We'll wind the time machine back to the beginning. So born and bred in Adelaide, but were you always exposed to motorsport? How did you sort of get into it?
Well, I was always keen on motorsport from a very young age. I was driving when I was 8, and we grew up on a property in the Adelaide Hills, and I had my first car at 12. But I always thought that it would be cars. I never thought it would really be bikes. And when it came to having a working career, my parents, academics, they made sure the 4 kids got good educations. I was the one in 4 that didn't take up the university option. And started work, and the way to get to work in those days, the cheapest possible way was on a motorcycle. And out of a motorcycle you meet other people on motorcycles, and you meet up with like-minded people, and then there's one on the edge that says, well, I go racing. And you go out to the racetrack and you have a go yourself, and you work out you're not coming last, and suddenly you're racing motorbikes.
So did you take to the racing side of thing naturally then by saying you're not come last, or did it still take a little bit of work as well?
My first outing wasn't that productive. I ended up at the Royal Adelaide Hospital 49 years ago with having a skin graft on my right wrist. But the next race I entered was a semi-prestigious Adelaide Advertiser 3-hour race, and I finished 3rd, me and my mate Jeff Ellis. So suddenly you think, 3rd against the best in Australia, we're either very, very lucky or we might have a little bit of talent here. Yeah. So I persevered and made through at the ranks in Australia to an A-grade level, but by 1979 I could see that there was very few professional riders in Australia. Greg Hansford, perhaps Warren Willing, but not anybody. The rest of us, it was costing us money to do it.
Yeah. How would you describe the racing scene here in Australia in the 70s, and how would it compare from, say, a commercial standpoint, say with superbikes now in terms of popularity?
It was definitely more popular in that era. More participants, the costs were less. The factories, Yamaha in particular, produced production motorcycle racing bikes which were used in Grand Prix in Europe, the TZ series of bikes from 250, 350 and 750 were, my first 350 was $2,000, and yet they don't produce those bikes anymore, so it's different. It's come back to a more production-based racing, and let's face it, motorcycles today are $50,000 items and just as much a year to run them. So that's a lot of money. So.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So your first bike was really the Suzuki T500 Cobra, or Cobra?
Yes, that was one of the first bikes. That was the first bike I had riding on the road as a go-to-work bike.
Yeah. So that was what, to describe to our listeners, I guess, that's what, 492cc two-stroke twin cylinder?
Yeah, two-stroke twin cylinder, 46 horsepower, 34 millimetre carburetors. In its day, in 1969, they ran the T500 series for a number of years, but at that point in time, the Honda 750 had just come out. There was no 900 Kawasaki, there was no 750 Kawasaki two-stroke. There was a 500 Kawasaki triple, but they were all what they called super bikes because they could do 100 miles an hour and they could cruise at 85 miles an hour. So it was probably a bit up there for a first bike, but I bought it off Hamish Cornell, who was the son of the Cornell Empire here in South Australia.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, cool. And then I guess from there your next bike was what, the RG500 Suzuki?
Oh, there was a lot of bikes in between, but certainly the RG was probably the cream of the crop.
Yep. What made it so good?
It was a purpose-built race bike made by Suzuki for the likes of Barry Sheene, Pat Hennon and the Grand Prix riders in Europe. It was a massive amounts of magnesium and high-tech stuff, and it was a very ticklish motorcycle to keep running in good nick, and I liked that side of the engineering side of it. I liked keeping it going. I liked working on the bike as much as I liked riding it, and I wasn't scared to flog a bike hard because I knew what was happening inside.
And by having to keep that bike running with all the engineering that you're talking about, is that where you sort of discovered your love for the engineering side of things, and when you maybe discovered, well, that could be a path for me?
I think I always had a sort of balance between the two, so to sort of occupy one way or the other. If I'd been a better rider, I probably would have stayed on the riding side. I arrived in Europe in early 1980, sort of realising that at 27 I was probably past it. I was over there having a bit of a look, so to speak, and doing the Australian thing of that trip to Europe that we all do before we come home and settle down and raise families and what have you. So overall, I think it just slotted in very well with everything in my brain. I think it just worked my way.
Yeah.
So you had the ambition to go to Europe and try racing, or it was more vacation first, then racing second?
It was one of the more sensible things my father ever said to me. He said, whatever you do, sell your race bikes before you go, because they'll be a year older when you get back, which would have made them 2 years old.
Yep.
And he was absolutely right. When I got over there, I could clearly see that to race in Europe was going to be difficult, given the setup costs, and you had to be known first to get into the British scene and everything else. So I never really probably had a 20% intention of going over and having a ride, and 80% to have a look.
Have a follow-up couple of days.
Yeah. We'll find out a little bit more about your European stint. We'll just head off to a break shortly, and then we'll come back and continue the journey. Welcome back to Negative Camber, the motorsport show, proudly supporting Scuderia Ferrari Club Adelaide. I've got my co-host here, Lee Harrison, and alongside me, Jeremy Burgess. JB, so you're over into Europe now, and how did you become a part of the Texaco Hero team?
Yeah, it was fortunate circumstances in a sense. I was staying with another Australian, Mick Smith, who was working for Graham Crosby, who was the other rider when I arrived into Europe at the Texaco team, which was the ex-team of Barry Sheene. The other rider was a young American, Randy Momola, and they were looking for a mechanic to work with Randy. And out of all of this, I'd met Randy in New Zealand in 1976 when he'd raced there. We're talking 1980 now. And I'd raced against Crosby and knew Crosby well in Australia. I knew Mick Smith, and I also knew Randy's mechanic who'd worked here. He was an American who'd worked here in 1978 with Warren Willing.
Oh, that was George Vukmanovic.
George Vukmanovic.
Yeah.
So I knew a lot of the people, and added to that the fact that I'd been able to keep my RG running well in Australia. I think all things considered, I said to Mick, put my name down with the other 500, and I was called in on a Saturday morning to see Rex White, the team manager, and the next minute I'm working in Grand Prix. So thinking about riding again was sort of erased, we were in Austria for the first Grand Prix in no time.
Yep. What was it like working for Randy, and how do you rate him as a rider?
Well, a great rider as he turned out to be, perhaps, often referred to as the bridesmaid. But for me in that first year, it was very much a learning experience and really keeping your head down and just understanding how it all worked, because with no experience in Grand Prix, going and doing some tests and realising we're breaking lap records with this rider, suddenly there's an expectation to win the World Championship. So in a factory team, comes with that the expectation, the pressure on yourself, pressure on the rider, pressure from sponsors. The whole thing becomes it's a bit different to going out every second Sunday in Australia and thrashing your bike around.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. For those that are listening at home or not aware, Randy Mamola, he's an American rider, but he's a 13-time winner, but also runner-up 4 times in the championship of 1980, 81, 84 and 1987. What led to the switch to Honda then?
At the end of 82, Suzuki cut back from racing, and at the same time Honda accelerated their racing program and hired more riders. So they asked me if I would like to work for Ron Haslam, the English rider. We had a team of Freddie Spencer, an American, Marco Lucanelli, who had been the world champion for Suzuki in 81, Ron Haslam and Takazumi Kadayama. So we had a four-rider team.
Yep.
Honda asked me if I'd work with Ron.
Yep.
Was there any major differences straight away that you noticed from working with Suzuki to Honda that made you feel more at home, or things that sort of were surprising to you in the way they did things?
Yes, surprising the way they did things. Yeah, at Suzuki the bike was difficult to work on and hasn't been thought out with any sort of sympathy for the mechanical maintenance of the bike. So at the end of each day, you were seldom out of the garage before 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
With the Honda, you were sort of out by 8:30, 8:45. So it had been built with a lot more thought. It was a 3-cylinder engine against the Suzuki's 4-cylinder engine, but it was built with a far greater degree of simplicity. There were O-rings where on the Suzuki there had been gaskets, so the O-rings were reusable. They were cut into O-ring grooves. Everything fitted. Everything was done, and it's done that way today. So Honda just wanted to make sure when their equipment got to the racetrack, the work had been done. All that needed to be done at the racetrack was tune it for the rider to get the best for him.
It's no different, I guess, to how they approached Formula One during their different eras. They're more perfectionists and very articulate in terms of how they want things.
Yes, and that can cause problems too when things aren't going well. So it's not always the best organisation. There can be a lot of. It's not complacency, but it is to a degree perhaps complacency. When they win, they forget how they got to where they've got, and you end up with a group of engineers who have never been challenging engineers. They've always been winning engineers.
Yep.
So that creates its own problems, as it did later on for Honda.
Yeah. So you then made the switch over to Freddie Spencer, and that was under Irv Kanemoto's tutelage as well, yeah?
That's right. In 1983 and 84, I worked with Ron, and in 84 I did testing with Freddie Spencer, and I did some American races with Freddie as an extra hand to help Irv out. And in 85, Freddie was going with both the 250 and the 500 World Championship, the first time it had ever been won by the same rider, and Irv asked me to come on board to do the 500s.
Yep, that's really unheard of, and like in this modern day and age, you wouldn't expect, because now it's more of like a graduation of all the classes. They can't cross-enter both classes as well.
That's right, and that's sad to a degree too. I mean, a lot changed in 1992 when Dorna came on board, but prior to that, there was a lot of riders earning a living by racing a 250 and a 350, or a 50 and a 125, or a 50 and an 80.
Yep.
So they had that continental circus they always referred to, where people were travelling in caravans in the summer months. The mechanics were mechanics in the summer months, and 9 times out of 10 worked in the ski fields in the winter months. So it was a very sort of transient, cosmopolitan group of people, multi-skilled.
Yeah. What was it like learning off Irv Kanemoto as well? I mean, he's considered to be a guru nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, Irv was great, but, you learn and you only learn if you want to learn. And a lot of what we did with Irv, because he was so busy running, it was only the 1 year I worked there full-time with Irv. Irv was running both the 250 and the 500.
Yep.
Irv would be talking to Freddie about both bikes and then come out and direct us as to what to do with the bikes. And I would have to reverse think, if that's what he wants us to do, this is what Freddie's been saying to him. So I had to sort of absorb all of that and understand why we were making the changes without being told why we were making the changes, just that we are making the changes, whether it was suspension, gearbox, wheelbase, ride height or whatever. So you learn a lot, even though you're not getting all the pieces, and at times it's not easy to give the whole message.
Is that an odd situation that you found that was the only time where that happened in your career, where the rider didn't have direct sort of tutelage with you to tell you what was wrong with the bike?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I mean, it all changed there in 86 when the sponsors we'd brought in, or Honda had brought in 85, which was Rothmans, the cigarette company, wanted to go with a two-rider team. So in 86, we had to split the staff that we had. Irv said to me, I'd like you to run Wayne Gardner. I said, Irv, I'm happy working here with Freddie. I can get through the work. We've just won the World Championship. I'd be happy to stay. Irv said, it'd be good for you. And the Japanese said, if I didn't do it, I wasn't of any use to Honda anymore. So I didn't much have a choice.
Hands are tied.
Hands are tied. Well, look, we're going to come off, go to a break, but I want to really explore a little bit more about Wayne Gardner and Mick Doohan. So when we come back, we'll talk about the Australian riders. Welcome back to Negative Camber, the motorsport show, proudly supporting Scuderia Ferrari Club Adelaide. Alongside me is Lee Harrison and Jeremy Burgess. So Wayne Gardner, he's probably considered to be the pioneer of mainstream motorcycle racing here in Australia now. How did that... He'd been in the game for a little while before you took him under your wing, but can you expand upon how that relationship started?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I was saying before the break, the Rothmans wanted a team rather than one rider who could do the job. My belief was the same as Irv. If you've got a rider who can do the job, you don't need another one. And however, you know, in the world was changing, and Wayne was the best rider. He'd finished fourth or fifth in the championship before, and was definitely an up and comer. He'd done all the right things for Honda with racing in Japan and what have you. And as I said before, they asked me to run that team. Probably a bit tough on Wayne, you know. He's a new kid, and I'm a new crew chief.
Yep.
So we learnt together. We won the first Grand Prix. We won the World Championship the next year, and finished second the following year. Finishing second, of course, in '86.
Yep.
But you know, Wayne's legacy for sure is Grand Prix racing as we have it in Australia.
Yeah.
Out of Wayne, we got through Bob Barnard the revitalisation of the old Phillip Island circuit, the interest in MotoGP or 500 Grand Prix as it was in the 80s. SBS had it on television. Channel 9 stole it off SBS, so you saw that it had some commercial value.
Yep.
We get a track built. Wayne wins the championship. Then we get a track built. And all the kids are looking at Wayne Gardner. Along comes Mick Doohan. Along comes the Eastern Creek circuit. So yeah, I don't think we can underestimate Wayne's championship in '87, the first 500 championship for an Australian.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't underestimate that. It's kicked us. Here we are, you know, 30 odd years later, still reaping the benefits.
Yeah, 100%. Do you feel Wayne's career was probably shortened a little bit through like injury, or do you think because he'd come back to Australia to race in what turned out to be the V8s?
Yeah, look, Wayne was very talented, but he had to work very hard at it too. And you would see the same thing with car drivers. I think I always used to think that Peter Brock was doing it more easily than Alan Moffat, but the results would sort of be traded one way or the other. But Alan always looked very intense and very hard at it, and Peter looked always very relaxed. And a similar sort of comparison, Wayne had to work very hard at it. He won only the one championship, and he did get some injuries, of course.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Honda had a bit of a philosophy that, you know, you can win a championship if the cards go your way. Real champions win more than one.
Yep.
And that's what they wanted, and it didn't happen for Wayne. But out of Wayne, we got, you know, what we've got in Australia.
Yeah, sure. Mick Doohan, so he was after Wayne, but how did that opportunity come about?
At the end of '88, Honda came to me and said that we want you to do with another Australian what you've done with Wayne Gardner. And I was again in the same sort of position as I was when I left Freddie. Well, we're going okay here, why don't I stay? And of course then they'd signed Eddie Lawson into the Honda team to run with Irv Kanemoto. And they asked me to look after a young kid called Mick Doohan and sent me to New South Wales to make sure he signed with Honda. I met him there, and he'd already committed to Honda at that stage anyway, and away we went for the next 11 years.
Before we delve too much into more with Mick Doohan, was there any other Australians on the table at the same time that maybe just missed their shots, or were Honda solely looking at Mick Doohan?
Honda was looking solely at Mick Doohan. Of course, Kevin McGee had ridden in Europe. We'd had other riders earlier on, but at that point in time, the results came. Well, what they looked at, they had a very strong domestic championship in Japan, and they would invite riders up to compete in that championship. Moriwaki was a very strong subsidiary type manufacturer.
Yep.
He put a lot of money into the sport, Wayne Gardner particularly, Graham Crosby. So they were looking at this area as being productive of good riders, but they were still coming out of the States too. You can't underestimate Eddie Lawson and people like that. So
Mick had a string of titles. He won 5 from 94 to 1998. But if you had to make a direct comparison between Mick versus Wayne, what were the differences between the two and what made Mick so good?
Well, I think Wayne said it the best. Wayne said to me one day, he said, "I won't win many more races, but that kid will win plenty."
Yeah.
So I think you see it, the riders see it first, and then Mick, what I noticed about Mick was that he didn't make the same mistake twice. He learnt, he understood what he was doing. He was very intense. He was a different man at Christmas to what he was through the season.
Yep.
At the end of the season, he was a very relaxed character. Through the season, he was absolutely focused on what he had to do.
Was there a bit of that comparisons that you draw with Brock and Moffat, where Gardner maybe looked like he was working harder to get the same results out of the bike, whereas for Mick it came at a seemingly less energy?
Exactly, and that's a sort of comparison, I'd say. And Mick was one of the first riders to start to use the front tyre more and uses the corner speed of the bike, whereas prior to that it had been the American sort of get it in, point it, squeeze it, ride it off the corner.
Yep.
Mick wanted to carry the corner speed, as did another young American, John Kaczynski.
Yep.
Eddie Lawson was pretty much in the middle of both, so it worked for him as his career developed. But Mick wanted that front tyre working well from the very, very beginning, and that enabled him to carry more corner speed and develop racing in a different way.
Just expand upon that for our listeners at home, I guess, that are either watching the show or are somewhat new to the technical aspects of the MotoGP. Using the front tyre, so what exactly is that?
It's basically carrying more corner speed.
Yep.
In the old days, the guys would come racing into the corner, jump on the front brake as hard as they could, get it stopped to the apex, and then just get back on the throttle and come off the back with the back sliding and snaking and in a dirt track style, American dirt track style, they would say.
Yep.
Wayne was very good at it, but styles changed and bikes develop, and there's a better way to do things if you can find people to do it the better way.
Yep.
And Mick was one of those riders who could see that to go faster we needed to use the front tyre more.
So that's what's really prompted you to kind of almost change the engineering aspect of that bike to suit that type of style of riding?
We had to change quite a bit with Mick. It wasn't easy for him in the beginning. He wanted to go as fast as the guys at the front, but he was only as fast in his early years as the guys running for sort of 5th to sort of 8th.
Yep.
So there was a young man in a hurry that had to be sort of hand on the shoulder a little bit to say, hey, put a target on the guy finishing 4th, make him your marker this year, next year work on the next guys and actually have a plan to where you want to be. It's very easy to be in the top 5 in the world for any rider who comes over, and it has and you'd probably say the same in any sport, top 5 is pretty good.
Yep.
But it's like salmon swimming up a river. you'll find a lot you'll find the 5 in the pond. There'll only be one that gets out, and he's the guy that puts in the extra effort, which is usually brain power or physical fitness, as Eddie Lawson did. And we saw, as we know in racing, the thing that changes is the time gets more condensed. So you've got to be able to do more in that time. As the machines go faster, the time for one lap reduces. So you then have to be able to squeeze more into that time, process more information.
Sure. It's not different really to karting though, isn't it? Especially when you're starting from, you're new to the sport and you're sort of more at the bottom end of the timesheet, and you're kind of using that as a, I'll go to the next guy and I'll name for the next person, I'll aim for the next person.
Yeah, you have to learn, you have to understand what the guys are doing that are going faster than you. And you see a lot of riders to this day always crashing, losing the front, particularly with the heavy bikes. In the 80s and 90s with the 500s, it was more a high side. The bikes being heavier, and just the fact that they're 4 strokes tends to, the guys push and lose the front. And people like Mick Doohan were good at pushing the front but keeping the bike up.
Was there a memorable championship out of the 5 that you'd had with Mick? Is there one that kind of sticks out?
All of them, I suppose. I mean, I'd won a couple before, so the thing for me was getting the job done. I mean, you have to remember the emotive side of it. There's a young man who has set his heart, and he's given all his physical effort and mental effort to winning that championship. So for me, I get enjoyment out of their achievement, that they have achieved their dream, their goal. Sometimes it's a little difficult to get them going the next year, but the good ones have a little bit of a dip and usually can win it the next year.
Do those celebrations tend to last longer or less as you win more consecutive ones together, or is it, you're quite consistent with spending a couple of days partying and then we're on to next year?
Well, with the Japanese, they want you testing on the Monday after the last race, and in Mick's case, he usually won the championship with a few races to go, so we could enjoy the championship into the last races, but Mick was on such a healthy bonus system, he didn't let us slack off. He wanted to win all the races so that he picked up more money. But I mean, to see Mick win it after the injuries he had in '92, to come back and for us having to develop the thumb-operated brake for him, which other riders went on to use, and Mick said to me one day, he said, if I had a good right foot, I certainly wouldn't want a thumb brake. So they went through a period of time when everybody had them, thinking that's why Mick Doohan was winning. You don't see them anymore, but they won Mick 5 titles.
So obviously it wasn't too bad.
It worked. He couldn't use his foot, but he could use his thumb.
Absolutely. We're going to be off to a break. When we come back, we want to start talking, your main man, Valentino, and explore your thoughts on him, and then obviously we'll do a review of the 2021 season as well.
Okay.
Well, welcome back to Negative Camber, the motorsport show, proudly supporting Scuderia Ferrari Club Adelaide, here in our studio at Radio Italiano 87.6 FM. I'm joined here with my co-host Lee Harrison and our special guest Jeremy Burgess. So, JB, Valentino Rossi, how did that all start and how did that all come about?
Well, obviously, 99, Mick was injured in the second race, I think it was, in Jerez, and by sort of mid-season, sort of around August, he announced that he wasn't going to continue. He was going to retire. Valentino had just won the 250 world title, and every effort was being made to get him onto a Honda. Originally, Mick was going to set up a team with Shell Money, and I was going to go and work with Mick and be sort of like a satellite team to Honda. Didn't happen in the end, and Honda had Valentino signed, but didn't have anybody to run him, essentially. So we set up a really good little team sponsored by a great Italian beer company,
Nastro Azzurro.
Nastro Azzurro. And we had a wonderful time for 2 years. Finished second in the championship in 2000, won it in 2001. But yes, I'd been introduced to Valentino. The first time was at Phillip Island in 1999, the end of the season. we had a clandestine meeting in the garage where Sete Gibernau was riding Mick Doohan's bikes for that remainder of that 99 season. We had a bit of a bike fit with Valentino, and he seemed like a quiet, interesting young man.
Yep.
And the rest is history.
What's he like off track? I mean, you get this cavalier-like persona on track.
He's fantastic. He what you see is what you get. I mean, obviously with Valentino, every race is almost a home race, isn't it? You know, half the crowd's in yellow. On the other side was always a red side, whether it was Max Biaggi or as it is now, Marc Marquez. But Valentino to me, he's great at work and great away from work.
Yep.
And what about in terms of celebrating his championships? One of our listeners just wanted to know how good were Valentino's parties? He seems like he could throw one when he was needed to.
Yeah, in the early days they were something else. I mean, you'd heard about these parties by the Americans in the early 80s for sure, and you saw the destruction of rent-a-cars and what have you that did go on with the Americans and was purely an American thing. It wasn't a European thing. It wasn't the way you behaved. But I remember in the early days several parties where fish were flying around the restaurant and the maitre d's up the end just sort of counting the cost and putting it on the bill. Gary Coleman and I are sort of pushed back in our chairs a bit so that we're not getting collected by the pool, drinking our beer as two elderly blokes.
Yeah.
But, the wonderful time. And his Valentino's inner circle, so to speak, the fan club and that group were instrumental in all of that. They would get it all going.
Yep.
The thing with me for the Italians and meals is that they start too late. Valentino would go out for dinner at 10 o'clock. I'm going to bed at 10 o'clock.
Is that because of like when he'd finish his debriefs and engineering stuff, or is that just a lifestyle choice?
I think it's as much a lifestyle choice, yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter what day it was. To get Valentino for dinner at 8:30 was pretty near impossible. But then again, he didn't have a reputation, and probably still doesn't, for being on time for anything, really.
Oh.
Even drivers' briefings.
Is that right? Yeah. I mean, he missed a practice once because he slept in. So.
With that, so from 2001 to 2005, you'd won the championship with Valentino for 5 successive years. Yeah. Is there any one of them that actually sticks out to you as like, well, yeah, that's a good one?
Oh, his first on the 500, and which was the last of the 500 championships, was an important one to win for many, many reasons. I think he wasn't going to get another opportunity on a 500. Yep. We were going over to a 4-stroke. That one was special. Obviously, the first one at Yamaha, when Yamaha hadn't won a world title in 11 years. Yep. To go there, turn that bike around as quickly as we did, have a rider like Valentino to do it, and an engineering group at Yamaha who were so keen to do everything we asked was just magnificent.
Yeah, and that was my next question, was how that change to Yamaha had come about, and what were they like in comparison to Honda?
The change came about, Valentino, Honda made the announcement that they were going to sort of farm out bikes all the same to everybody, which is pretty much the case today. Mm-hmm. You hear about the factory bike and the non-factory bike, but they're still factory bikes. Yep. At that point, Honda couldn't really say to their customers they're not going to be the same as Valentino's bike, but Valentino sort of felt that everybody's getting his bike. Yep. So he felt that he wasn't being rewarded perhaps in the way he felt he should be for winning at what it was at that point, 3 world championships for Honda. And he was courted by David Brivio at Yamaha to consider coming to Yamaha quite early in 2003. I was given the brief by Honda, Mr. Tachikawa, to keep Valentino at Honda. Yep. And my line of approach was that, we've got the bike, we've got the rider, we've got the team, we've won 3 championships, why change? And he said, Jerry, it's more than that. And
did he ever tell you what it was?
Yeah, it was pretty much that he didn't feel like he was getting the respect that he needed for winning 3 championships. And if Biaggi or anybody else was going to come and ride a Honda, they were getting everything gifted to them.
Yeah, fair
I
enough.
mean, there's a lot of egos in motorsport, so you got to deal with that at any time. I mean, to digress a little bit, you could win a Grand Prix last Sunday, and the rider could get on your bike on the bike on Friday and say, if this is all we've got, we might as well go home. But you don't know if he's had a tiff with a girlfriend or he's dropped $500,000 on the stock market. Yeah. So you've got to work yourself around it. Yeah. But in the case of Valentino going to Yamaha, he that was what he felt. He felt that he wasn't getting treated the way he felt he should, and I understand that. I did my job for Honda, persevered, and when it was clear that in Japan, when Valentino handed back his contract unsigned to Honda, that he was definitely going to Yamaha. That decision, I found out much later, had been made well in advance of that, but he had done the right thing with Honda contract-wise, not to embarrass them. And on that morning, he asked me, well, he had asked me before what he thought Honda would do if he left. And I said, well, they'll bring out everything they've got to beat you. And he was quite worried about that. He didn't know. I didn't know exactly what we'd tested, what we'd developed, what had been coming. Yep. So there was a certain amount of a fear factor.
Yep.
But in the meeting on the Sunday morning in Motogp, in his cabin, I said to him, look, if you think it'll make any difference, I'll come with you. And I can still see his face. He was just over the moon. He was just ecstatic. His friend Uche was jumping up and down. Yep. Because, you know, they'd made approaches to me to go, and I'd worked at Honda for 21 years. I mean, I'd won championships for Honda. I was happy at Honda. I didn't have any reason to leave. I would have taken on the next rider. But after I said that, I walked into the garage and I said to the boys, the mechanics, I said, I'm going with Valentino to Yamaha. And the other guys said, well, if you're going, JB, we're coming too. Yep. So I went, oh, well, I said, you know, you guys have got mortgages, everything else. It's it's a bit of a risk because we are burning our bridges. We can't go back to Honda if it doesn't work. Yep. But anyway, off we went to Yamaha.
And how did the bosses at Honda react when you walked in and said, well, today's the day I leave?
Well, it didn't sort of work like that because you used to get called in like a Grand Prix or two before the end of the season, the last European Grand Prix as it used to be, before we did our trip to Australia and Malaysia and Japan. And they'd talk about your contract for the following year. And at that point I had delayed any discussion, so I think they were aware. And I don't think that the Japanese companies do things without informing each other. There's a lot of things you find out later that you piece it together and you know that as a courtesy they let people know.
Yep. And so obviously the transition to Yamaha had taken place, and again that was successful as well. And it was only really that the title that you'd lost to Nicky Hayden, really, that was the blot on that coffee book and that stint. But what made you guys want to go to Ducati? Because that's chalk and cheese compared to the Japanese way of engineering and how they do things.
Yeah, except if you spoke to Filippo Preziosi, he told me we do everything the way that the Japanese do. And the processes were the same, but the intent was a lot different. Yep. But wonderful people at Ducati, no question. The reason we did that was Valentino, we'd just gone through the financial crisis. Yep. Valentino's salary had been reduced. Lorenzo was becoming more of a threat on the Yamaha. Valentino thought if he would to Ducati, and he'd been wooed to Ducati by Filippo Preziosi, that he would be number one and he would be half a second quicker than Nicky Hayden. And as it was, it didn't work that way.
Yeah. Was Valentino, do you think, sort of inspired or from the results that Casey Stoner had?
Well, Casey didn't really have any results in 2008, 2009, 2010. Yeah. He had his glory year in 2007, and you talk to anybody who owns a Ducati, and that seems to be the only year they ever remember.
Yeah, exactly.
We've had brilliant riders at Ducati: Troy Bayliss, Troy Corsa, So the Australian connection with Ducati is very strong, and Australian connection with Italians is strong. I mean, I grew up with Italians in Bridgewater and Aldgate Primary School, and that's part of our life. So we're very similar in many ways. And Casey did an incredible job in 2007. He had Bridgestone tyres, but as soon as we got Bridgestone tyres the next year, we won back the title twice, 2008, 2009. Lorenzo won it in 2010. Not to take anything away from Casey, because as soon as he got on a good bike, which was the Honda in 2011, he cleaned up again. So, the rider's there. The bike wasn't there at that time, except for that 1 year with the advantage of the Bridgestone tyres and Casey's brilliant riding.
Yeah. We're going to go off to a break, and we're going to come back and review this season with you, and then explore the end of the Ducati years as well, and also just get your thoughts on some trivial matters too.
Fine.
Welcome back to Negative Camber, the motorsport show, proudly supporting Scuderia Ferrari Club Adelaide. I've got my co-host here, Lee Harrison, and special guest here, Jeremy Burgess. What were your initial thoughts on the 2021 season?
Yeah, pretty interesting. The thing that sticks in my mind is that the Ducati's a good bike now, and I always was of the belief that you make a bike that everybody can ride, and your best rider will ride it faster. So that was my philosophy at Yamaha. It seems that it's now working at Ducati many years later. To see 3 on the podium at the end was encouraging, and I think Bagnaia has a real shot at it for next year.
Yeah, 100%.
And hopefully Jack can get up there too, because they should both be very strong.
Yeah, 100%.
Finally learns to look after some tyres.
Yeah, I mean, Jack's there, but he fundamentally you want to be the number one on your particular brand of motorcycle. So Jack needs to make himself the number one Ducati rider. He's got to close that gap to Bagnaia, and then the rest of the championship will be his.
Yeah, 100%. We're just going to go to some highlights now of the 2021 season, our top 5 moments for the year, and then we'll come back and start to delve in further into the season.
Aussie, he's done it! The king of the ring, Marc Marquez wins! Fabio Quartararo is the 2021 Motogp World Champion! Grazie Vale! The moment we've all been waiting for has arrived. It's race day in Motogp. Lights out here in Spain. Good start that one. Fabio Quartararo and Morbidelli as well. There's Miller. It's swallowed. It's gone wrong. Miller is going to take the lead from Pecco Bagnaia. Look at the corner speed he carried through 12. Absolutely brilliant. Superb. That was all set up through turns 11 and 12 with the superior Yamaha corner speed on the brakes into 13. Easy does it. Fabio Quartararo leads. Quartararo's got a problem, he's got a problem. He's lost another 3/10 in the first sector. Miller thinks it's Christmas Day. He's going up alongside Fabio Quartararo, and he outbreaks him, and he's leading the Grand Prix. What a ride! This has been from Jack Miller. What a ride! Jack Miller, Aussie, he's done it! Miller wins in the MotoGP race here in Jerez. What a day for Jack! They can't believe it. They cannot believe it. Absolutely brilliant scenes. The German Grand Prix is underway, and it's a rocket start there on the outside for Zarco, but Quartararo's coming through. It might well be Aleix Espargaro, and Marquez has got the inside line as well. He's up to second. Oh, he is. He's having a lunge, Marc Marquez. Marquez leads at the end of lap 1 here in Germany. Marc Marquez has got his head down here now. He's 1.5 seconds clear of Jack Miller in sector 2. Marquez has been absolutely phenomenal, supreme. What a comeback, what a return, what a race, what a world champion. The checkered flag is out, he is back, ladies and gentlemen, and still the king of the ring, Marc Marquez wins here in Germany. What a moment in history, what a sporting story. It is 11, it is heaven for Marc Marquez, can you believe it? He's done it now, 11 years on the trot for him, 11 years on the trot now for Honda. 581 days since his last victory, and he is back. This is wild, absolutely wild. A bunch of different manufacturers and riders in the mix to win. Martin back on Quartararo up the hill into the first corner. He's back in third. Bagnaia wide on the exit of the first corner. Marquez leads. Wow. And Binder's up the inside as well. This is mad. The late breaking show from Fabio Quartararo. How far did he come back to get the two Ducatis of Martin and Pecco Bagnaia? Brad Binder now right in contention. He's there in 5th place. Oh, they're all coming in. Binder's gone for it. Binder is the only one that's going to stay out on circuit. These are all changing tyres. There are 4 laps remaining. Mark has a good look around his shoulder. Wow, what a show. The Austrian fans have got here. And Brad Binder crosses the line leading from Alicia Spargo. The checkered flag is out, ladies and gentlemen. Brad Binder wins in KTM's backyard on slicks in the wet. What an extraordinary tale. Brad Binder on a tightrope. Can you believe it? What a race. What a risk taker Brad Binder is. And listen to this noise now.
Welcome back to Mazzano here for the Grand Prix of Emilia-Romagna. It's match point Fabio Quartararo. He could become world champion here today.
Eyes on the lights, and away we go. Good start from Miller, really good start. He's going to go past Pecco Bagnaia, surely, into turn 1, coming through Miguel Oliveira as well. It is. It's not been the start that Fabio Quartararo needed. He's lost 2 places straight away, out of the points. 15th to 17th for the World Championship leader.
Quartararo's through on Zarco on the last lap, set his personal best lap of 1:33.032. Quartararo has moved up to 9th. He's got through on Jorge Martin. Fabio Quartararo is quicker than all of these guys, up ahead of him as well. Well, Fabio Quartararo now coming up alongside Franco Morbidelli. I don't think he's going to fight back on that one. He gave him more than enough room into turn 4. Marini makes a mistake into turn 8. Fabio Quartararo does go through. There goes Quartararo at turn 4 on Rins. Oh, wide there from Alicia Spargo. Here comes Fabio Quartararo. He picks him off, and he does move up into 5th. What happened there? Quartararo's right foot was off the peg. And Alicia Spargo sweeps straight back on through. Although no, Quartararo through the fast right-handers. Well, he said he wasn't going to take too many risks. Fabio Quartararo is the 2021 Motogp World Champion. The 22-year-old Frenchman. He's France's first ever MotoGP World Champion. Stop here, he's told. What a day in the life of Fabio Quartararo.
Welcome back. And
Fabio Quartararo looks at the story of his career.
Your biggest takeaway from that?
Well, I was very happy to see Yamaha win it. I still think that Quartararo is a little bit fragile. I think, they need to put him under a bit more pressure. It was a good year for Ducati. Probably a very good year for Ducati, really. Just didn't go on long enough.
Yep.
I watched every race. Sort of sad to see Valentino sort of lingering around at the back after all those years. But, I didn't miss a race, but it didn't sort of grab me.
Yeah. Was Valentino, do you think, more performance-related from the human element, or was the bike just not up to it?
I know, bike's fine. Bike won the World Championship.
Yeah.
And Valentino's career's been sort of going backwards for a good number of years now. And other guys on the same bike have been doing very well. So, even Vinales, when he started there with Valentino the first year, he won the first 3 races, and Valentino could see he was a threat. And then they started to test chassis and retest chassis and mess stuff around, and instead of just twisting the throttle and riding the bike, Vinales was having to sort of believe in what Valentino was saying because he's got the experience.
Yeah.
And this is what we're seeing with the young riders now. They just twist the throttle. Bagnaia, once you ask them to develop the bike, they might struggle even more.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see as they mature.
Looking ahead to next year, what do you see the championship shaping out like? And more importantly, what's the hopes for Remy Gardner?
Yeah, Remy Gardner's done a terrific job. Probably kept the old man out of the garage a fair bit this year. But I haven't watched a lot of Remy, but it's a fantastic effort and great to see. He's now in a team where he's going to get experience in MotoGP. Plenty of bikes out there for future years. Doesn't always mean he has to stay where he is. He's just got to show what he can do. I'm looking forward to watching the young riders come through and the old riders see how they develop.
Would you say next year would be make or break for Jack?
It's an important year for him for sure. I think he's got to be ready to go. He's got to make the right tyre choices and for sure. With the years he's been in there, he's running out of years and he's still very young, of course, but he wants the results soon.
Yeah. Do you see him making the correct tyre choice as the biggest area for him to improve, or from your outside looking in, are there other areas?
Look, I think, the tyre choice should be relatively simple. You should use it. I mean, the incident we had in Misano where the two Ducatis fell, it's a case they couldn't use the medium tyre. When you saw the press release from Quattararo, his medium tyre was absolutely shot to bits. So it wasn't a question of them picking the hard front tyre and it being the wrong tyre. It was the right tyre for them to use. It was just too hard. And this is what you get when you have a one brand tyre. You have no competition within the game, and they build anything, they're going to win. When Michelin were in it before, they would build a front tyre for Mick Doohan and a different front tyre for Kevin Schwantz. So you had some much more support for the individual, but you would get that if you had Bridgestone competing and Dunlop competing. The one tyre brand to me just turns it into a soap opera on Sunday night because it's on every night and every Sunday, and we sit there and watch it. We enjoy it from our living rooms. But if you're in the technical side of it, it's a friggin' disaster.
Yeah, it's that whole thing about sport and entertainment again.
Exactly.
The topic we brought up the other week. Jeremy, it's been a pleasure, an absolute honour to have you on board. Thank you so much for coming in. We're actually hit the halfway point of the show now. We've got our next guest coming up, which is Supercars Royalty in Dean Canto. So thank you once again, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, great pleasure for me too. Thanks, guys.
All right, we'll be back with Dean Canto.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.